In the previous lecture, we spent a little bit of time thinking about how we're going to build our test runner. We ended up implementing an event emitter, which is going to help us keep track of all the suites and the tests, and we ended up with this map data structure. We have some knowledge about the test suite now. We know how many suites there's going to be, we have knowledge of the tests, and we also have knowledge of the handlers. What we don't have is the relationship between the suites and the tests. So for example, over here, this describe suite is going to have one child, which is going to have one more child. If we are going to go ahead and make a few more observations, we can say a suite, which is going to be a describe block, is going to have 0 or more children. In this case, it's going to be a 0 to many relationship. Conversely, a test is going to be a little bit different. That's represented by an it block, and that's always going to have one parent. So in this case, this describe block has one child. It could have 0, it could have many, but this test block is always going to have one parent. It's a kind of rule of this particular framework we're building that a test block must be inside of a suite. So what this means is we can use an array to represent all of the children of the suite, and we can use a single ID to represent the parent of the test. Let's go ahead and implement that one. As we implement that, we're going to keep one more thing in mind. That is, we'd like to know how deep everything is, or the depth. In this case, the depth is 2. We start off with 0, then 1, then 2. The reason this is going to be useful is when we build our reporter, we need to know how much we need to indent each of these tests and suites. So the first thing we're going to do is make sure we're keeping track of these parents and these children. And there's a really nice way we can do this. We're going to use what's called a stack. It's basically going to be an array, but there's very specific rules about a stack data structure. It's going to be a last in, first out data structure. So for example, if I was pushing in an array of 1, and then I pushed in another array of 2, the only object or the only value we can access is going to be that last one. If we want to go back to the start, we need to first pop off this other one here. And this is going to give us a very specific data structure, which is going to be very useful for what we're trying to accomplish. It might not make a little bit of sense yet, but we're going to see why this is useful in just a moment. What I'm going to do is each time we emit this event, the add suite event, we're going to push the ID into our stack. And each time we finish executing it, we're going to pop it off. What this means is I can go ahead and see stack.push, and we're going to push in the ID. We're then going to call the handler, and somewhat unintuitively, we're going to pop off the value afterwards. Let me do a console log just to show you what's going on here. We're going to do a console log here of our stack, and then we're going to do another log after it has been popped off. Let's head over here and just run this and see what happens. If we scroll up to the top, we should see a few different values, and so we do. The very first suite is executed, and we have one entry in here. Then the next suite is executed, and we're now going to have 2 entries. And that's going to be that first entry, which is going to be the top level suite, and then we're going to have the next child. Specifically, it is referring to this demo top level, and then it's going to be the nested one. We're then going to execute our test, and then we're going to pop off one of the values. So you can see this 71A value is at the very top, but this other one has been removed. It is a last in, first out data structure. Finally, we then pop off the last one, and we're back where we started at no values at all. And that's going to be at this point in the code. We're then going to go and push a new value in, and that's going to be this new suite down here. After that's executed, we're going to remove it, and we're back to where we started. The reason this is useful is twofold. We have a very easy way to know the current parent of the test we're executing. It's just going to be the very last value here in the stack. Another nice value or another nice bonus we get here is we know the depth. We can just count the number of entries in the stack, and we know how much we need to indent our test when doing our reporter. So let's go ahead and make sure we're saving these values for using later on. I'm going to delete both these console logs, we don't need them anymore. But what I'm going to do here is put the parent. So for example, the parent is going to be the previous value in the stack if it exists. In this case, it might not exist, we could be at the very top level. So I'm going to go ahead and declare a new variable first. Let's just go ahead and call that one parent. And it's going to be depending on the stack. So if we have the stack.length, we know we're not at we're not a top level root suite, so it's going to have a parent. In this case, it's going to be stack, and then we're going to grab the last value by saying stack.length -1. Otherwise, it's just going to be undefined, so I'm just going to say undefined. Finally, I'm going to pass in parent here. Now we have knowledge of the parent. Let's go ahead and run this again and see if it's working. If we scroll up here, we can see we're going to have some parents. This first one is going to be undefined, which makes sense. That is going to be the top level suite. If we look at the next one, the demo nested suite, that's going to be down here. It is going to have a parent. It starts with 3E, and that is going to correspond to that top level parent. So everything is working correctly. We don't have the current parent for the test, but we're going to have to implement that one quite soon. What we actually need to do is also implement the children. So we need to know not only the one-way relationship, in this case we know that this suite belongs to this parent, we need to know the opposite, so all the children for this suite as well. This is going to be very useful later on when we're executing all of the suites in a recursive fashion. So let's go ahead and first update the test to have the correct parent. That's going to be this one here, and then we're going to handle children. The first thing we need to do is going to be very similar. I'm just going to head over to my other handler for my add test. That's going to be down here. We're going to do exactly the same thing, and I'm just going to pass in parent here as well. Let's just go ahead and give this one a test and make sure it's working. You can see we have, scroll up to the top, we have this test down here. It is going to have the parent of EEA, and that is going to be the correct corresponding suite. So everything is now working correctly. The next thing we need to do is keep track of the children as well. This is going to be useful, as I said, when we come to recursively execute all of the test suites. So let's go ahead and see how we might do that. It's going to be very similar, but we're not going to push it in here. We're actually going to push it into the previous or the parent. So in this case, we have the parent here. What we need to do is go ahead and grab the actual suite and push in the children. So for now, we're going to assume that all suites have no children, and then we're going to update them as we go. In this case, if we have a parent, we're going to push it in. So we're just going to go ahead and say if parent exists. If it does, we're going to update that one. So I can just go ahead and say handlers, and then we're going to go get and grab the correct one, which is going to be the parent. Remembering this is going to be an ID, and this is a map. So we're going to use get to access a value. And then we're going to say children, and we're just going to push in our new ID. So that should be children.push. Let's go ahead and give this one a try and see what happens. If we scroll up here, we can see this suite has no children, demo 2. Let's just go ahead and clarify that's correct. This is demo 2, and it actually should have a child. This should be the child, so that is incorrect. If we scroll up here, let's see if this one is working. The first one is saying this has a child of BEE, and I would expect this one's child to be the demo nested suite. If we look for BEE, it is down here, so this is actually working correctly. This one should have a child though, which is incorrect. We want each suite to have children as well, whether it is going to be tests or suites. So it looks like we need to make a small change. We need to do this exact same thing, but again, we need to do it down here inside of the add test event. You might notice I am doing quite a bit of copy pasting. That means there's probably a good chance for a refactor. Let's go ahead and make everything work first, and then we'll figure out if and when we need to do this refactor. Go ahead and run this one more time. Let's just make sure everything is working. So for example, if I look at this last test, the works test, it is going to have a parent of 196 in this case. That's going to be this one up here. And that is corresponding to suite, which is going to be the demo 2 suite. So that is exactly what I was expecting. Everything is working correctly. We've now managed to successfully set up our parent and child relationship. And this is going to get us one step further to correctly executing and then tracking the result of each of our tests and suites.